These are things that are more often used just to achieve a specific look on stage, whereas for powerlifters and strongmen, these are things that are used to drive significant psychoactive effects and neurological adaptations in conjunction with their striving for, gains in sheer mass.
What's up, guys? Derek, moreplaysmoredates.com. Today we're going to be talking about powerlifter versus bodybuilder steroid cycles. So this is a question I get commonly asked all the time, is how do the two differ? What would be, agents chosen by powerlifters versus bodybuilders and why? What kind of health ramifications may come as a result of the choices used? Why do certain things excel for strength relative to things used for more cosmetic reasons in the bodybuilding space? Just a brief overview of kind of my findings over the years and what I kind of see as the main flagship differences between the two.
So when designing a, quote unquote perfect bodybuilder protocol, it's usually something that is going to focus more so on protein accretion and pure hypertrophy outcomes in an off-season phase. So what's going to build the most muscle? Like, less focus is given to something that drives neurological behaviors or things that have to do with obviously strength as a byproduct of muscle size, but hypertrophy with a relative lack of androgenicity is usually what is sought after in a off season for bodybuilders. Whereas for powerlifters and strongmen, obviously the cycles are focused on muscle growth too, of course, and just sheer mass accrual, but they're also more heavily oriented towards compounds that promote neuromuscular efficiency and enhance acute performance behaviors far more than what you would otherwise get with the, quote unquote bodybuilder cycle. So powerlifters, strongmen, they often leverage compounds that result in high levels of force production, and depending on if they have a weight cut limit or not, sometimes with a relative lack of increased body weight. So obviously this is going to depend on if you're in some sort of open event where you don't have a weight limit to make, or if you do have a weight class to make, then your choices will vary significantly. But the goal outcome is high levels of force production, whereas the only time bodybuilders will incorporate these types of compounds for the most part are pre-contest, and this is when compounds with a high level of androgenicity are kind of pulled out of the tool belt, so to speak, to enhance the cosmetic look they're going after on stage, to enhance that dry, grainy, cosmetic look that would otherwise not be achievable with certain more tissue-selective anabolic agents that aren't heavily skewed on the androgenic component, and not just androgenic component, but also the neurological impact that the compound itself has. So for example, a compound like drostanolone, Masteron, is commonly used during the last 6 to 8 weeks of a contest prep among bodybuilders because of its unique cosmetic effect. And this effect is largely mediated through its ability to decrease estrogen-induced RNA transcription subsequent to estrogen receptor binding and provide a cosmetically pleasing grainy look that you would otherwise not get. However, this compound is hardly ever used in off seasons because it's perceived by many to be a, quote unquote weak muscle builder for bodybuilders. And, does this actually play out in practical application? It's obviously debatable, but most bodybuilders don't use it in the off season. It's just how it is. A stack for a powerlifter or strength-focused athlete, though, would vary significantly from this. And depending on their weight class cutoffs, of course, though, or lack thereof, it's going to largely influence the compound choice. But the compound choice, it's approached a bit differently than how a bodybuilder does. So, for example, anadrol is something that is commonly abused by strength athletes. However, if there's a tight weight cutoff, then a background DHT derivative like Masteron or Anavar might make more sense because it's less weight retentive and it doesn't have the inherent inhibition of estrogen clearance that anadrol seems to have. So Masteron and Anavar, as opposed to anadrol, would promote high levels of force production with a relative lack of increased body weight. So this is something that would be, despite it being them both being compounds used by strength athletes, one would make more sense for somebody who has a strict weight cutoff to make versus somebody who is freely able to push the scale up in a for whatever weight class they're in or whatever event they are doing. So in addition, sometimes there's going to be scenarios where somebody can't eat on anadrol, for example. That's a common problem. So that individual might save it for acute performance enhancement pre-workout only on specific days or pre a big event or something like that. It's not like everyone can get away with the same things. It's all very individual specific. However, the choice of compounds is blatantly more skewed towards performance outcomes than a bodybuilder, for example, who would, very likely never use anadrol during an off season. It's very unlikely you will find a top open bodybuilder who needs to consume a ridiculous amount of calories to gain as much muscle as possible in the off season who would ever utilize anadrol during their off season. It's usually it's a compound that works very well at gaining muscle, but it's more or less a compound that people use in their newbie years and then thereafter realize that it was not the most conducive thing to making maximum gains in the off season, simply because of its obviously its hepatotoxicity. It's not something that should be used long term for a several month off season, but on top of that, it can make following your diet near fucking impossible. So if you want examples of bodybuilding stacks and kind of like best practice for risk management and how to go about intelligently designing a protocol, I have a lot of videos that talk about this in depth. So I'm not going to make this a science heavy video. It's more so going to be a general overview, a sweeping overview of kind of the difference between the two approaches. So, for example, an advanced steroid stack for bodybuilders versus an advanced steroid stack for strength-focused athletes might look something like, on the bodybuilder side, testosterone base for the compound that's a substrate for aromatase. You have the testosterone. That's more or less going to be the choice from the testosterone subcategory or the testosterone family of the anabolic steroid family tree. It's usually going to be testosterone chosen. Then looking at the DHT derivative, something that is focused on, that's very tissue selective, anabolic, and heavily skewed towards pure protein expression like primobolan would be an ideal choice for something as an adjunct on top of testosterone as a bodybuilder in most cases. And then above and beyond that, at a higher level, you might see guys starting to incorporate nandrolone decanoate during their off seasons as well. An advanced stack for a bodybuilder will often look something like, testosterone with primo with some deca during an off season. Whereas for a strength focused athlete, their cycle might look more like testosterone as their base is pretty common for the just hybrid broad spectrum effects on anabolic and androgenic dependent functions, as well as their interaction with aromatase. And obviously testosterone has strong influences on red blood cell count, energy systems, and basically exhibits a hybrid of behaviors in the body analogous to how endogenous steroidogenesis would otherwise regulate balanced activity. So, it's anabolic, but not wildly so. So it facilitates a middle ground level of muscle growth, as well as neurological effects and enhancement of aerobic mechanisms. So this is why it is such a versatile compound, not only for bodybuilders, but for powerlifters and strength athletes. And it often serves as the base of most cycles. And this is where the testosterone base kind of statement comes from. Now, when you get to the DHT derivative side of the anabolic steroid family tree, though, for powerlifters and strength athletes, this is where things differ a bit more, like where they start to look at things like anadrol is very commonly used, like I mentioned. Tren as well, when you go to the 19 Nor side as opposed to nandrolone. These are compounds that are far more potent in building strength and driving acute performance outcomes, as well as the neurology component are far superior to something like a primo and a nandrolone for breaking PRs and getting through performance plateaus that would otherwise be more difficult to drive through with agents more heavily focused on pure hypertrophy. And at a higher level for acute performance benefits, things like testosterone suspension, halotestin, or even check drops are sprinkled in acutely to with strength athletes quite often and powerlifters to peak for important training days or events. This is something that, bodybuilders sometimes will utilize pre-workout and whatnot, but not on a regular basis. And most bodybuilders in the off season, like I said, they're focused on pure hypertrophy. They're not overly concerned with trying to make their mind as fucked up as possible and get as insanely aggressive as they can and go at the weights like a rabid dog, like a powerlifter might need to. So, like testosterone suspension is something that's in and out in a matter of hours. So driving performance with a hit of no ester test is always going to pack a massive punch, and this is why it's often used by strength athletes. It's not something that's going to be used year round, but it's something that's often going to be leveraged in an acute performance context, as well as things like halo testing and check drops. These are, next level anabolic androgenic steroids for aggression. And if there were steroids that would be labeled as roid rage inducers, these would be them. Halo comes from the testosterone family. It is a derivative of testosterone, despite it acting very similarly to a pure DHT, I guess, on paper. And check drops come from the 19-NORs side of the family. Check drops in particular has very interesting applications in many sports above and beyond just the standard, like bodybuilders, powerlifters, strongmen. This is something that is like Halo is a favorite among strongmen and powerlifters, but check drops too, while they are favorites of strongmen and powerlifters, they're also very popular among MMA fighters and boxers because of the acute spike in aggression and favorable pharmacokinetic profile for circumventing drug testing. And purportedly, check drops were a favorite of Mike Tyson. I don't know how true that is, but that's probably something I'm going to dig into a little further too as I get into some more of the history of anabolics and some of these natty or nots that have been on my to-do list. Obviously, Mike Tyson is a highly requested topic, and I want to dig into that a bit more. The check drops are a very interesting 19-NOR that aren't talked about too often, and frankly, it's because they're not too useful in a hypertrophy context, but for driving ridiculous amounts of aggression and neuromuscular efficiency, it's something that is very, very effective. As far as how cycle design overlaps, there is some overlap as bodybuilders start to get deeper into a show prep a couple months out. And, sooner than that is 6 weeks, 4 weeks out, 2 weeks out. This is when some of the hardening agents are swapped into cycles. And even Halo itself, Halo testing is commonly thrown in during the last couple weeks for bodybuilders stepping on stage. But in general, the approach for bodybuilders is tissue selective anabolic androgenic steroids in an off season. And these DHT derivatives and heavily skewed to the androgenicity side of the spectrum, anabolic androgenic steroids are typically reserved strictly for enhancing a very specific cosmetic look rather than driving actual goal outcomes during an off season. Like nobody's trying to build muscle on Halo test and nobody's trying to build muscle on check drops. Nobody's trying to, most bodybuilders aren't using these things pre-workout on a regular basis. These are things that are more often used just to achieve a specific look on stage, whereas for powerlifters and strongmen, these are things that are used to drive significant psychoactive effects and neurological adaptations in conjunction with their striving for, gains in sheer mass. So for a powerlifter, gaining size is obviously just as important, but so is the neurological component above and beyond what it would be for a bodybuilder. And the goal of the compounds that are heavily skewed in the neurological side of the equation are more so things sprinkled in by powerlifters for performance and more so leveraged by bodybuilders only during contest prep phases for the home stretch to achieve a very temporary look that could otherwise not be achieved with some of the more tissue selective compounds. So in general, that is how they differ. In a very sweeping overview, that's kind of the goal of each of these protocols. You'll have the bodybuilders that are more so striving for anabolic activity via androgen receptor activation, aromatization, and 5-alpha reduction, or, to balance out the estrogenicity or androgenicity of the stack they're using, or the downstream conversion into metabolites that facilitate increases in muscle size and strength, and also antagonism of glucocorticoid receptors, leading to the inhibition of muscle protein breakdown and a net increase in muscle size and strength via this muscle sparing effect, more so pre-contest. And then on the powerlifter side of the equation, we have things like, and just strength-focused athletes in general. More so to the other side of the spectrum, things are far more important too, like the psychoactive effects in the brain leading to stronger training and subsequent increases in muscle size. Stimulation of erythropoietin production leading to improved aerobic performance for events that are less anaerobic and more aerobic focused as opposed to just hitting a PR, for example. So obviously there is individual specific situations that warrant different kinds of protocols, but in general, this is just a sweeping overview of assessing the effects on muscle building and performance that these compounds really drive, and kind of elaborating on what the main differences are in general. Obviously, there are so many exceptions to this, and everybody has their own specific goals, their own specific sports that they're looking to excel in, their own specific adaptations that they're trying to drive, and it's all very individual, and you cannot just generalize like the way this video is, but just like for every single person. But at a higher level, this is sort of what applies the majority of the time for the average guy who is trying to drive any of these sort of outcomes, regardless of what sport they are doing. If it's a hypertrophy focused endeavor versus a strength focused endeavor, this is sort of the approach that is commonly taken between the two and how they differ. So take from that what you will. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe, drop a comment. Helps the algorithm when you guys comment down there, satisfying the almighty YouTube algorithm. It's much appreciated when you guys do that. Follow me on Instagram at moreplates_moredates, Facebook, Snapchat, BitChute, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. If you want to support the channel, check out anything I am associated with in the video description below. My TRT clinic. If you're seeking hormone optimization, testosterone replacement therapy, I recommend you reach out to them. There's a medications page that you can see the kind of services we offer, and it actually expedites letting our patient care coordinators know what you're interested in, what you think you would benefit from, and then they can arrange a free consult with you over telemedicine, Skype, FaceTime, Zoom, all from the comfort of your own home to go over your blood work A to Z, get you in touch with our doctors who will then help design a protocol conducive to your goals if warranted, based on your blood test results and your symptoms or whatever it is that they feel is necessary to address. You can save $50 off your first treatment. All meds are shipped right to your front door without you even needing to leave the house, which is awesome. You can save $50 off your first treatment with MPMD50 coupon code. If you want to support Gorilla Mind, my turnkey nootropic and pre-workout formulas, the nootropics, basically cognitive enhancing supplements designed to max out productivity, focus, creativity, basically get more high quality work hours out of each day. This is what I use personally to knock out 14 to 16 hour work days on a regular basis. And they work very well at it, to be honest. If you are somebody who crams for exams, if you're a student, if you're an editor, if you are somebody who just needs to stay on point for more hours than you would otherwise be able to, these formulas are exceptional for that, and I highly recommend you give them a shot. As well, pre-workout formulas, obviously self-explanatory what those are. I encourage you to go pull out your current pre if you're not already using Gorilla Mode and compare the labels to Gorilla Mode, our stimulant-based hybrid pre-workout. This is kind of like the flagship of the brand at this point. Gorilla Mode Nitric, our stimulant-free pre-workout with insane levels of hyperhydration and intramuscular fullness, and the most potent nitric oxide precursors, and the dosages are just absolutely fucking absurd. Just look at the L-citrulline content, look at the not inflated with malic acid, look at the nitrosamine, look at the agmatine sulfate, look at the glycer pump, look at everything in the blend, and you'll see pretty transparently why it is a top of class stimulant-free pre-workout. And then just released recently too, we have Gorilla Mode Stim, which is our essentially an energy formula, which is more or less the energy component of Gorilla Mode extracted out into its own more cost-effective product with a higher dosage of the cognitive enhancing blend in that product. And this is going to be designed more so for general broad spectrum energy and mood elevation, and kind of like something to sip on during the day that's going to beat out your standard energy drinks and things like that. And anything else I am associated with, you can check out as well in the video description below. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.